Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the 1977 Toyota Celica Restomod. Today we're going to inspect the Beam's engine. We're going to start out by changing the oil. We're going to be turning this engine over by hand and possibly with the starter today. And I don't know what's in this oil pan. I don't know how old it is, how contaminated it is. So I just want to get it out of there. And then we're going to pull the plugs, take a look at those, check out the cylinders, check out the intake valves and exhaust valves, and see what else we can get into. We are going to definitely do a leak down test, possibly a compression test, we'll see. We've got some tools and everything set up to keep things moving and organized. We'll see how that goes. Let's get into it. This engine hasn't been run in I don't know how long. I don't know what we're gonna find when we remove this oil drain plug. Hopefully, just oil. We'll find out. Oh, that bolt is tight. There we go. That's good so far. No water, or anything that looks like water, and that would be under the oil at the bottom of this pan. So, oil looks dirty, but that is okay, because it's just oil. We'll take a look at it here with the light when it's done draining, see if we can see anything scary in it. Hopefully not. I considered sending this oil out for an oil analysis, but I was chatting with a few people and decided to skip sending oil out for an analysis because it's been sitting for so long, it's contaminated, who knows what's in it. I'd get a reading on metals in the oil, but any type of fuel or water contamination isn't going to be reliable anyhow. Unless I see anything horribly concerning, we'll skip the oil analysis and just do a home inspection. Hopefully this thing's not on here. The strength of the Hulk. Oh yeah, that's pretty tight. Yeah, that was on there with an unnecessary amount of force. I can actually see the gasket kind of squeezed. Here comes the oil. Not sure how much is gonna come out when I remove this. Seems like not too much. Oh, a little bit. Smells like oil, a little bit of fuel, but not too bad. Doesn't smell like gear oil or anything crazy that would indicate trying to thicken things up to make the engine appear healthier than it is, so that's good. Well, looks like oil, and there's lots of little bubbles from it draining from such a height, but it doesn't appear to have any glitter in it, which is always good. Nothing too concerning going on over on this side either. Oil's dirty, but clean. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna clean this up, throw some fresh oil in it, and then we'll be ready to start doing some tests. All right, oil filter on, drain plug back in. We're just throwing cheap stuff on this for now. This will get dumped before the first startup. Pop the oil cap off. Looks good, no crazy condensation or dirt. From what I can see down in the valve cover, things look pretty clean. I still am gonna pull this valve cover off just to check things out, but we have fresh oil and I now feel decently enough about turning this thing over by hand. So next up, we're gonna pull these spark plugs. I did pull them previously, I sprayed some fogging oil into the cylinders because I wanted to lubricate the cylinder walls and the rings a little bit. So I'll explain what I saw with each one as we get there. Let's pull each of these plugs again and have a look. I don't know if it will focus on that or not. There's some oil on the threads. That is probably from me spraying that fogging oil into the cylinder. So this looked good. The tip and the ground strap are both in good shape. And this one was pretty clean initially. Let's see if we can get the inspection camera down in there. Come on. Come on. There we go. All right, down in the cylinder. And that's the piston top. Looks pretty clean. I mean, there's a little bit of carbon buildup. But overall, looks clean. There's the valves partially open on this one. Can't really see them that well, but they don't look dirty. Move that around a little bit. Cylinder walls don't look awful. Doesn't look super rusty or corroded or anything in there. I'm gonna call cylinder 4 good. Cylinder 3. All right. Again, lots of oil on the threads. Some of that's from me. This one did have a little bit of oil on the threads before when I took the plug out initially, but overall, not bad. It does look like the gap's a little more open on this one. This one had some oil leaking prior to me spraying the fogging oil down in there, but let's see. Pistons very close to the top and seeing lots of buildup. Lots of deposits. This cylinder was a little concerning, initially at least, because when I pulled the plug on cylinder 2, there was a milky, oily substance, and as a car guy, you see that and you freak out. And then I realized it was above the spark plug. So some oil leaked from the spark plug tube seal, and some moisture, condensation, whatever, got in there and just kind of mixed a bit over time. Not ideal, but also not really gonna hurt anything. But there was a good amount of it, and I'm sure some went down into the cylinder when I took this plug out the first time. Oh yeah, you can see it. There's still a decent amount of milky, oily, whatever. Let's take a closer look at the plug itself now that it's clean. And overall, the spark plug looks pretty good. The gap looks a little big, but I've seen much, much worse. There's some of that, again, that condensation, milky, oily grossness, but it's in the valve cover. And down in the cylinder, things don't look terrible. Again, a lot of deposits on the piston, but it doesn't look terrible. And finally, cylinder 1. This was pretty clean when we looked at the engine initially as well. And again, spark plug in used but decent condition. This one was pretty dry. Most of this is from the fogging oil that I sprayed down into the cylinder. This is a little further down. So yeah, a little bit of buildup down there, but not awful. And this piston is lower in its stroke. Again, this was pretty dry. That's the dampness from the fogging oil, but you know, looks fairly consistent. I mean, some deposits, but nothing too terrible. So that's good. Pretty happy with that. So there it is. I'm going to turn this over by hand a few times, make sure it feels fine, doesn't bind up. I do have the plugs in, so I'm expecting some resistance from the compression. We'll do that, and then I'm going to get set up for a leak down test. I just picked up this OTC cylinder leakage test kit. I have not used it before, have not done a leak down test before. You know, that's hard to believe as a Subaru guy, but fortunately, didn't have that particular issue. All right, so I'm gonna turn this over by hand just to see how it's going. You can hear the valves doing their thing through the exhaust, and a little bit through the intake actually. The throttle's not open. I don't think that matters for a leak down test. Here's our timing marks all coming into alignment. And there we are at the bottom, lined up. Let's pull this plug and see. All right, I don't have shop air. I have this tiny little compressor, but I think it's going to work. I have a breaker bar on the crank pulley just to hold it once I have everything hooked up. Pulled plug number 1, lined up down here, and the timing marks at the top lined up here. Means cylinder 1 is at top dead center, which makes sense, as it should. So I think we are ready to try this. Well, the leak down testing didn't go as planned. My 3-gallon compressor doesn't have the reserve capacity to maintain pressure, and it was constantly cycling on and off. I also tested each cylinder multiple times, so I'll skip the boring details and give a summary instead. Cylinder 1's leakage was between 5 and 8%, which is pretty normal, but I could hear and feel a decent amount of air leaking from the exhaust, so I'll have to look into this one a bit more. Cylinder 2 was the worst, with 10 to 12% leak down. Even though this is double the leakage from cylinder 1, I didn't notice a major leak at the intake, exhaust, or valve cover, so I'll have to check into this one more as well. Cylinder 3 came in between 5 and 8%, with a little bit of air leaking from the exhaust, but it seemed like a lesser amount compared to cylinder 1, even though they have similar leakage values. Cylinder 4 kept trying to turn over, but I used the breaker bar to hold the crank pulley in place, and with the cylinder held at top dead center, the gauge was showing 8 to 10% leak down. These numbers aren't great, but they aren't horrible, so I decided to remove the intake and exhaust manifolds and check for any noticeable issues with the valves, which we'll see now. Well, we didn't get nearly as much done today as I had hoped. The intake and exhaust manifolds are off. Valves look okay. And leak down is done. I'm fairly happy with the numbers. I'm still not completely convinced I did everything 100% correctly, but with between 5 and 8% leak down on cylinders 1 and 3, between 8 and 10 on cylinder 4, and between 10 and 12 on cylinder 2, I would say that that's pretty good. I have the chain on there. I think I'm going to get this back on the hoist. I have an idea on how to get the starter mounted up to run a compression test. I think I'm going to do it just for the peace of mind. So for now, I've got the exhaust ports and the intake ports taped up. I sent a little more fogging oil down into the cylinders just to protect them and also help continue to lubricate the piston rings and the cylinder walls. Hopefully this engine's fine. I think that it probably is. It would be good to know because this engine's going to sit for quite a while after the warranty period has ended. So that's all I have today. If you have any thoughts on those leak down numbers, if I did anything wrong, let me know in the comments so I can learn from any mistakes that I made. If you're enjoying watching this build move very slowly along, throw the thumbs up on there, hit that subscribe button, or smash that subscribe button, I think is the correct thing to say. Thanks for hanging out, watching me struggle with this leak down test kit. Stay tuned.